As investors rush to buy the 3 nationalized banks put up for sale by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, analysts have begun to speculate about the transparency of the corporation, raising questions about its ability to take debtors on. Uche Okoronkwo shed some light on AMCON's progress in recovering debt from defaulters.
The tale of a global financial crisis, a collapsing financial sector, and a regulator's bailout. The Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria was created by the government to stabilize the country's ailing banking sector by taking on over 1.5 trillion naira of their non-performing loans. 1 year, a reported 600 billion naira recovered, and a stable banking sector later, the nagging question is whether debtors have been brought to book.
AMCON hasn't really released that much detail for one to look at. As obviously there are rumors and there are stories about what's going on, but until one, we see the actual banks, the audited accounts for 2011 and see what they've taken off their books, we wouldn't know. And two, until AMCON releases its annual report and its audited accounts for 2011, we're not really going to know for sure. In terms of the debtors, looking at the AMCON Act, it's very hard for them to get around AMCON recovering that debt if AMCON wants to. But it's all about whether AMCON wants to, the will to do it. They have the tools. You have a situation where loans were taken, in many cases deliberately taken with no intention of paying back. And what you've seen is that a lot of these loans crowded out actually genuine people who needed loans. If you look at the credit creation Nigeria had during the time, the banks were announcing this incredibly massive credit creation, but what was going to certain people. And if you look at the people in the SME sector and the grain sector who actually need these loans, they weren't getting them. So I think, one, you have to be able to punish people who've done things that are illegal. That's one, to stop the moral hazard problem, both on the banking side as well as on the debtor side.
However, AMCON CEO Mustafa Chike Obi says he is just getting round to dealing with these debtors. The streets of the financial capital, Lagos, are testament to this, with properties around the city being seized by the corporation.
The total portfolio of AMCON is roughly 4 trillion, of which about 1.6, 1.7 is non-performing loans. AMCON was actually formed started operation November 8th, 2010, excuse me. So it's just over a year and 3 months. And we acquired these non-performing loans in 3 stages. The last stage was in October. So it's not fair to say we've had a long time to look at those loans. I will tell you that AMCON was really focused on sanitizing the banking system, recapitalizing the banks in 2011. And that this is the year going forward that we're going to start looking at dealing with the issues of the non-performing loans. Because yes, they're an issue, but like I told you, it just represents about 1/3 of all the assets we acquired. And we had to make sure that the banking system was healthy again. Going forward, we intend to have discussions with every single debtor, understand each debtor's unique situation. If it's a situation that can be salvaged, we want to salvage and help. But you're going to have cases where the debtors are not able to pay, or businesses are no longer viable, in which case we must recover what we can through the sale and acquisition of the collateral of the debtor.
Zenon Oil, owned by billionaire Femi Otedola, is one of the largest debtors. The Nigerian oil giant owes more than 100 billion naira to 8 local banks.
To be honest, it's not very clear, because obviously the banks stated that, previously the banks stated that it's confidential. Thing with Zenon, there have been a lot of court cases. There was once the banks put, a group of banks put a judgment in the papers, asking for a Minerva order and seizing all the assets. And now apparently AMCON have bought the debt of the banks. So I think in terms of Zenon, I think we have to wait for AMCON's annual report and how they've handled that debt. I think Zenon was a systematic risk to a lot of the banks because they owed a lot of money to a wide circle of banks. And I think it was part of the issue was really the banks didn't really do their jobs properly. AMCON is looking at a lot of these companies, and some of these companies are very big companies, and they employ a lot of people. And so the idea is, what are you going to close down these companies, loss of jobs, especially now they want to try and increase job employment across the country, or are you going to give them some breathing room, give them an opportunity to try and recover the debt and try and basically grow the company out of the debt. I think AMCON is choosing the latter.
Cases like this have led to whispers that AMCON may have taken on too much, and questions have been asked whether the company is going too easy on its debtors.
We have not actually started enforcement proceedings against debtors. We are preferring to have them come in here, have discussions with us, and see whether or not it's a business that can be supported. So far, everybody we've talked to has come to an agreement with us that we feel comfortable with, that they can pay. Much of these issues are issues of short tenor loans, where the business requires a long tenor loan, high interest rates that the businesses cannot support, and in some cases, the construction loans, and in the construction period, the debtor is not able to service the loan, and so we run into a problem. What we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to them and see what the problem is and try and work it out. So far, we have worked out, in other words, we have reperformed over 600 billion worth of loans. And what that means is that they've paid us a significant amount of good faith payments. They've restructured the loans, and the loans are now performing and now in good standing. That's our initial approach. Down the road, of course, we will get to people who cannot or will not pay, at which point we will commence enforcement actions. And when we seize collateral, we will seize collateral with the same attitude of managing the collateral for the highest possible value.
I mean, AMCON has quite a wide mandate. And in the AMCON Act, eligible bank assets that can be taken on is defined by CBN at any time. So CBN can change the definition. And if a loan like Xenon loan or the Silverf loan is defined by CBN as an eligible bank asset, AMCON has the right to buy off the banks if the banks are willing to sell. So that's interesting. But you see, the main problem that a lot of analysts have is that we have a lot of distressed loans. Have they been addressed? Does AMCON have the present capacity to manage all those distressed loans? To now bring in some new loans into the process that the banks, some banks claim were performing. Does it make sense to do that and add to the capacity? So those are the kind of questions you ask, because and if you look at, AMCON hasn't really sorted out some of the banks. They took over, I think, 3 of the banks, Main Street, Keystone, I can't remember the third bank. And they're going through the process again of trying to get those banks off the books. So, I mean, there's a danger of AMCON taking on too much, in a sense. And I think that's what quite a few analysts are worried about.
Stakeholders are hoping to get more answers come March 31st, when AMCON presents its books to the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank of Nigeria.